Today we're going to be making a guide video with tips and tricks on how you can get better at Valorant. I am still a beginner at this game, though in this video I'm going to be giving you some tips that I wish I knew sooner, especially if you're first starting out on the game. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like, as it really helps out the channel. I'm also on the grind to reach 100 subscribers, so if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later. Also in the description there will be timestamps where you can skip to in case you only want to see a couple of tips. Now with that said, let's get straight into the video where I show you 5 Valorant tips you need to know as a beginner. Now really quick, before we get into the tips, I want to give you some background on what Valorant is. Valorant is a tactical FPS shooter where there are 5 players on each team fighting it out in order to be the first team to reach 13 round wins. You can get a round win by having the bomb explode, defusing the bomb, or killing the enemy team. There's an attacking team and a defending team. Now that we got the basics out of the way, let's get into tip number 1, maps and communication. Currently in Valorant there are 5 maps in rotation, which are Icebox, Haven, Bind, Split, and Ascent. Each of the maps have different callouts, which I will be showing you right here. Feel free to pause the video if you want to get a better look at the map callouts. You can also view the callouts by holding the M key on your keyboard. Callouts are a really important part to the game and is probably the first thing you're going to want to learn before you even play a ranked game. Communication is very important in FPS games, since in FPS games they're really fast paced. You're going to want to call out things like what bomb site you're going to be defending, what angle you're going to be holding, and where your enemy can be pushing. Feel free to talk in the mic whenever you can and make sure you keep a level head when playing. Sometimes you do find toxic people just trying to bring you down, so make sure you mute them if they're going to make the game miserable. Keep calling out as much as you can in order to give your team the best chance to win. Tip number 2, know your agents. The next tip we're going to be talking about is the agents in the game. If you have played FPS games like CSGO, you'll notice a big difference when it comes to the game. Valorant has agents. As of this recording, there's 15 agents in the game that are split into 4 different categories. First, you're going to have your duelists, which consist of Jett, Phoenix, Raze, Reyna, and Euro, with the most popular being Jett. Then you have your initiators, which consist of Sova, Breach, and Skye, with the most popular being Sova. Next, we have our controllers with Brimstone, Omen, Astra, and Viper, with the most popular being Omen. And finally, we have our sentinels with Killjoy, Sage, and Cypher, with the most popular being Sage. The reason I've been telling you the most popular agents, since these are the agents everyone tends to find the most useful in the game, and some agents that you may want to try. I personally like to main Omen, since he's an agent that really helps with the team and you can play aggressive whenever you feel like it. It took me a couple of months to find out which agent was right for me. With that being said, it might take you a while for you to find your agent, so just be patient with the process. Duelists tend to be aggressive players, so if you're someone who likes to entry or you're somebody who likes to play aggressively, you might want to try to be a duelist. If you're someone who likes helping out the team by giving them flashes or information, you might want to try initiators, since they really are a support role for your team. If you like being able to control or smoke out the map, you might want to play as a controller. And finally, if you like playing passive and holding down sights, you might want to go with the sentinel. So to reiterate, try out each agent, see which ones you like. There's definitely an agent for you depending on your playstyle. Tip number 3, positioning and peeking. Positioning and peeking is probably one of the most important parts of any FPS. This is especially true in Valorant. You need to make sure you learn where to position your character and learn what angles to play from. One of the biggest tips I will give you is to make sure whenever you're trying to get yourself positioned, you're positioned away from a wall. When you do this, you give yourself a better advantage to see your enemy as soon as they see you. If you peek close to a wall, the enemy's going to see you a couple of milliseconds before you see them. Also, whenever you're positioning yourself away from a wall, you're going to be able to get to cover quicker. Now let me show you an example. If you're holding this angle from C long and you decide to peek close to the wall, you're going to have to peek wider, since you're going to be peeking from the left side of your body and you're not going to be able to see your enemy yet while they're able to see you. That time difference might be the reason why you end up dying in the round. You're going to want to peek like this instead of peeking like this. Another tip I can give you whenever you're focusing on positioning, you're going to want to make sure your back is against the wall. This makes it so you eliminate another angle from where your enemy might be able to be. The more angles you're exposed to, the more angles you're going to need to check. Now the final thing I want to go over when we're talking about positioning is in defense, you're going to want to make sure you're constantly switching up your position. Let's take this for example. Let's say you're holding B garage from this angle. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you're away from this wall and peek a couple of times to see if you see a couple of enemy players, or if possible get a kill on one player. After you see a couple of players pushing, what you're going to want to do is make sure you take a position like this behind this box. Maybe hold this angle for a bit to see how many kills you can get. Then maybe hold an angle like this or like this. You see, in defense, you're mainly going to want to take up angles that will not leave you in the open, and angles that will allow you to rotate safely away from enemies without needing to cross a huge gap in the map. Now let's get into tip number 4, movement. The most important part of movement is not to move whenever you are shooting. Moving while shooting can greatly mess up your accuracy. Take this for example. Let's say you're moving while shooting with a Vandal. When you are moving, your spray pattern is going to look like this. See how the bullets go all over the place? Now this is how the spray pattern should look like whenever you're just standing still. So whenever you're about to shoot, you're going to want to come to a complete stop and have your gun reset to become accurate again. Now I'm going to talk about a way you can counter this problem, and it's called counter strafing. See what I did there? Now what counter strafing is pretty much when you come to a complete stop, pressing the other key that's going to counter your movement. For example, let's say you're using the standard WASD to move and you're moving to the right with D. What you're going to want to do is tap the A to make your character come to a complete stop and make you accurate way faster than having to wait a second whenever you're waiting for your gun to reset. If you want to practice your counter strafes, what I recommend doing is going to practice and testing it out with bots. I tend to practice my counter strafing by practicing on 100 stationary bots. Again, make sure you counter strafe before you shoot at any bots. Speaking of shooting, let's get into the last tip. Tip number 5, aiming. So aiming goes hand in hand with movement. But to reiterate from the last point, you're not going to want to move while shooting since it's probably the biggest factor on your aim. At the moment, I really haven't gotten a consistent warm-up routine that I really gotten used to since I don't really play Valorant for hours on end, but hint hint, it might be one of the next videos to see how I perform with aim training. I think a good beginner level warm-up training that everyone can start is by practicing shooting 100 bots in the head. Also, as mentioned earlier, I would also add another 100 bots, but this time using counter strafing to gain that muscle memory. Another thing that's really important when it comes to aiming is you're probably not going to want to spray down your opponent unless your opponent is probably 10 meters or less. Spraying in this game is very random, meaning that there's no recoil pattern for the guns after around the 5th bullet. The randomness makes it harder to control your spray as compared to other FPS games. So what you're going to want to do is burst spray your opponent. Whenever you're bursting, you are typically going to want to tap your gun like this and release around 5 to 10 bullets to make sure you don't start spraying too much. This is why counter strafing is really important in Valorant. If your crosshair is not on the enemy's head, you're going to want to move your crosshair a little bit and reposition yourself in order to make it harder for your enemy to hit you and give you another chance to aim at your enemy's head. Aiming also takes a lot of practice, so the more you practice your aim, the better you will become, and it's all about starting to build that muscle memory and that habit. One last point I want to mention is crosshair placement. If you have seen other tip videos in Valorant, they've probably gone over this topic, but I'll go over it really quick just in case you haven't heard of it. Crosshair placement is basically what you're going to want to do in order to have the fastest kill time. You're going to want to always place your crosshair at head level to where your enemy is positioned at. This will help you get a lot more headshots, which translates to more kills. I hope you guys learned 5 Valorant tips you need to know as a beginner. If you guys really enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe as it really helps with the channel, and also make sure to check out the other videos on the channel. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.